program this morning with Mr. Tanner Gers, who I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment. And then he's going to speak to us for a little while, and then also give time for you to ask him any questions that you might want to. And I have a bio. I typically don't like to read long bios, but this one is I think so well written and so moving, and it will in a couple of minutes give you a snapshot and an understanding of the young man that you're going to hear from. So if you will indulge me, I'll read it. Once in a while, you meet an individual who has an effortless ability to motivate and inspire everyone around them. Tanner Gers is one of those individuals. Growing up, Tanner was a typical all-American boy, excelling in school, sports, and volunteering for organizations like the Easter Seals. On March 28, 2004, Tanner was in a traumatic auto accident where a tree shot through his windshield and impaled him in the face. While emergency services wrote Tanner off, he fought for over 75 minutes before making it to the hospital. Suffering a traumatic brain injury, fracturing his spinal cord, shattering his face with a massive hole in his skull, Tanner miraculously survived. Things became worse when 19 days after his accident, Tanner woke up from one of his many surgeries, totally blind. Determined to not be defined by his disability, Tanner faced the world and began moving forward one step at a time. Immediately after becoming healthy enough to walk, he enrolled in college and in 2006 found a job. In 2008, he found two new loves of his life, his wife and beat baseball. The competition and teamwork between baseball for the blind and his wife only brought more life, positivity, and opportunity to Tanner. In May of last year, he competed in his first track meet and qualified for the National Championships for disabled athletes. At the championships, Tanner not only brought home some medals for the long jump and 100 meters, but was nominated to the U.S. National Track and Field Team Paralympic Division. In November, he traveled to Guadalajara, Mexico to represent the United States in the Paralympian American Games, where he won the gold medal and was the Paralympian American champion in the long jump event. Tanner's extraordinary athletic achievements in an equally short amount of time reflect his determination to succeed and foreshadow his future successes. In addition to winning the gold medal in 2001, Tanner also competed in the National Beach Ball Tournament, and he received the 2011 Offensive MVP Award, and while he was studying communications at the University of Arizona. Tanner continues his education at the university and just recently participated in the 2012 Paralympic Games in London. He finished 11th in the long jump and is already training for the 2014 Winter Paralympic Games in Russia. Tanner is an extraordinary young man. I know his family, his mom and dad, and I remember in 2008 when his mom said, "Tanner's going to the Olympics in 2012." And I thought, okay, that's great. I wondered what sport he would compete in. I'm not sure he knew what sport he was going to compete in, but he knew he was going to the Olympics. And I'm hoping that today we'll hear a little bit about that and a little bit about the story that has brought him here today. So Tanner, welcome you to the podium.
Dr. Albrecht, thank you so much. Pretty much you said everything, so we're done here. Yes, before we get started, I also would like to show my sincere gratitude and appreciation to Florida State College, Becky Simpson, everybody here at the staff, the iLab, making this possible, and of course, Dr. Crystal Albrecht for making this possible for us to be here today. I'm really excited about speaking for you guys today. And I'm also excited because this is kind of a homecoming for me. I used to live here with my family in Jacksonville. And if you're familiar with the area, over there by the dog tracks up in Orange Park, that's where we were living. And growing up, my family and I, we moved, I say I, but it was really my family. My family, we moved all over the place. I mean, we also lived in Orlando, Florida, Anaheim, California, Mobile, Alabama, Houston, Texas. I was born in Lafayette, Louisiana. I lived there several different times. And now, currently, I live in Tucson, Arizona. So, that all seemed to happen really, really fast. I mean, moving city to city, state to state. For my brother and I, that really meant we were moving from school to school. And if you ever transferred into a new school, you know what it feels like to be the new kid. And I hated being the new kid. I didn't like it at all. To give you an idea of how often that was happening for me, when we moved to Houston, Texas, I was starting 4th grade. My 4th year in school. I was also entering into my 5th school. So my 5th school in 4 years. And growing up, kind of like Crystal had mentioned, I was this all-American kind of kid. You name it, I was probably into it. Whether it was organized sports or, playing ball in the street. Acting and drama, I loved doing that. Music, I loved to dance. I was always at the school dances, dancing with the ladies, meeting some people. And cooking, I love to cook. Food, I'm such a sucker for food. And just so you guys know, I am the master chef at my house. That's between us, though. She found out. And I was also really all-American in that I was a hard worker. I mean, work is something I just do well. I'm physical. I'm not afraid to break a sweat. Get in there and take care of business. TCB. And so it was really natural for me when I was 16, we were living in Tucson, for me to go to work. And I did. I worked really hard. I was going to school, playing sports, somewhere figuring out how to clock those hours and get that paycheck. I didn't have a car, though. I was really motivated for that, getting my first car. And I saved every dollar that I made, literally every single dollar, until I had that opportunity to buy my first vehicle. And it was an awesome car. It was a 1968 Ford Mustang, very all-American, right? And it was green, with green vinyl interior, 3-speed manual transmission, 3 on the floor, if you know what that is, and very fast, very all-American V8 engine. Of course, right? What would a Mustang be without? Why do they even sell those without V8s? I don't know how they do that. But yeah, and I drove the Stang. I drove it hard. I just didn't enjoy going the speed limit. I like moving fast so much that I really didn't like hitting the brakes. I wouldn't hit the brakes. I would do everything I could to not touch that pedal. And, I kind of started to build a reputation for myself at school. I was pulled over countless number of times. Very skilled at handling that situation. Back in the day when I was 16, man, gas was 99 cents a gallon. If I'm aging myself a little bit there. And to give you an idea of how hard I was driving, I spent more money on speeding tickets and replacing tires than I did on gas. I was spending those tires. At least every year I went through 60,000 mile tires. So I was leaving some rubber on the road. And I just really liked driving fast. My parents would always tell me to, don't speed, put on your seatbelt. And most of the time, sometimes I'd forget, but nearly all the time I was wearing my seatbelt. It was rare that you would find me not speeding. It's just who I was. I was fast. And people got around, to knowing my Mustang. They would say, hey, that's Tanner's green Mustang. And I would like to think that they knew my car because they they knew me. But it wasn't like that at all. They were really fearful of my Mustang. Like, oh my gosh, don't get in the car with him. And so building a reputation. But I graduated high school. I cruised through that. Did really well. I had a great time in high school, and went up to ASU to study business. Love business. But up at ASU in Phoenix, there was little studying going on. It was really party. I partied hard, just like I drove my car. And that's not something I'm proud of. I'm actually really ashamed of it. But I wanted to tell you guys that that choice to party and flush an opportunity down the toilet was a mistake that I've regretted for a long time. I partied so hard that I didn't even make it through my second semester of my freshman year. Midway through the semester, I went back home, and I didn't know what to do, so I just did what I always did well, which was work. So I went back to work, and I made money. I made good money for high school education, 19-year-old. And I continued that lifestyle choice, that party lifestyle. I worked really hard during the day. I was partying at night. And I did that for about 2 years before I realized that I had nothing to show for myself. That was an eye-opener. Here I was busting my butt, partying at night, and I was going nowhere. I realized that I had to make a choice, that I was either going to continue going down this wrong path, this very apparently wrong path, or I was going to take action. I was going to do something and begin making something of myself. I had so much potential. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I had just, got done with the school thing. I didn't think that was the best choice to go back to school, and really took a lot of time reflecting on where my strengths were and how I was going to apply that to my future. When I was going to ASU for the first time in college, that was the fall of 2001. And if you remember, that was the unfortunate time of 9/11. My roommate woke me up and said, "Tim, you got to see this." And we ran down the hall to a room, to a TV, and I saw that plane, that second plane, flying to the tower live. That really had an impact on me. It touched me because there was a lot of people in my dorm that I knew who knew people or had relatives working in and around the Trade Center. So when I was reflecting on what I wanted to do with my life, it made sense to me to join the military. I wanted to serve our country. First off, I would just be proud to do something, to have that honor and defend this great land that we call home. And secondly, it really made sense because I work, and I could apply one of my greatest strengths to the military, my work ethic, come out, and when I'm done, besides all the experience that I would have, the lessons that I would learn, the discipline, I would have the opportunity to travel the world. And then when I get out, thank goodness, the military would pay for me to go back to college. I would have another opportunity. I was so excited. I had just turned 21. It was 2004. The momentum that I had moving forward in life, it just felt so good. It felt great to be on the positive side. One Sunday morning in March, I was on my way back home to my parents' house. They just moved to this new place. It was out in the country, literally the end of a dirt road. You don't drive by this place. It is a destination you arrive. And so it was outside of Tucson. It took a while to get there. It was this long, windy road. And, just like most other days, I didn't like wasting time going the speed limit. So I chose to speed. It was really common for me on this road, believe it or not, to be in excess of 100 miles an hour. My car at the time, I knew what it was governed to stop at because I would hit it on this road often. 127 miles an hour. Car could go faster, just the computer wouldn't let it. I tried to make it go faster. Anyway, this day, I was driving about 85 miles an hour. I was going through a turn. And as I'm turning left, my outside wheels go into the dirt. And my car begins to spin. And it's digging down in the dirt, spinning around, and when it comes back around to the street, it clips the edge of the road. And I begin to roll. And I'm rolling end over end over end. And I roll to the top of a 40-foot embankment, very steep, large hill. And I begin to roll down that. Before landing upside down, a tree propelled through the windshield and impaled me in the face. It broke my spinal cord immediately. I had T3 through T7 compression fractures. I had hundreds of pieces of glass in my face, my body, my head. The sheer impact of the tree to my face shattered every bone in my face except for my right cheek and my right optic. My left eye was blown out of the eye socket. A good chunk of my forehead was cracked open and blown off, and you could see my brain. It was exposed to air. A woman was riding her bicycle this Sunday morning. She heard the crash, and then she saw the dust cloud when I landed at the bottom of the hill. She pedaled feverishly over to see what was going on. She got there pretty quickly, and when she got to the top of the hill, she looked down, and she saw me. There I was, trying to pull myself from the wreckage. I was screaming for help. Somebody please help. She went down to the hill, to the bottom of the hill. She was a retired EMT. I guess that was a good thing. And she phoned emergency services. It was a miracle that, it was literally a miracle that I was alive, let alone conscious, pulling myself from the wreckage. I knew my name. And yet I had a hole so large in my head that you could put a golf ball in it and put your hand on top without feeling that golf ball. I was in trouble. The only question was whether or not I was going to make it to the hospital alive. And when emergency services got there, they didn't think so. Essentially, they wrote me off as DOA. That's dead on arrival. I had massive trauma. They decided not to put me in a neck brace, not to put me on a bodyboard. In fact, to get me back up that 40-foot hill, they decided to carry me by my hands and feet. That's how bad it was. This is emergency services. This is the paramedics. 35 minutes away from the hospital. That's what we were, 35 minutes driving. The medevac helicopter was busy though. Didn't have time to come get me right then. They laid me down on the concrete and began pumping fluids into my body, and I was losing a lot of blood. I began to lose consciousness. If you know about trauma, then you might be familiar with the critical hour, which is the first 60 minutes following an accident where it's crucially important for this patient to receive medical attention. I didn't get to the hospital until 75 minutes following emergency services arriving. That was enough time for them to properly load me in the ambulance, take me to the hospital, drop me off, and get back to the scene. Thankfully, the doctors got me and they saved my life. My head in ICU, my head was like a basketball. I was like a faceless basketball. I had 2 slits for eyes, 2 holes in the middle of my head where my nose should be, a slit for a mouth. My face was so swollen that they didn't even know I had teeth. 2 weeks I was in a coma. Unresponsive. Friends stopped coming by. And doctors began telling my parents, my family, my brother, what my life may be like if I wake up, if I come back to consciousness. And so, of course, the topic of taking me off of life support was discussed. You know, growing up, moving around a lot, my dad worked really hard. He was gone all the time. 2 weeks or more was common for him to be gone. Likewise, my brother and I, we found ways to keep busy, and most of that was through sport. And when Dad was in town to watch the games, man, that was exciting, because we just had that extra edge, that extra to get things done. We wanted to make him so proud. He was in town. And so we had ended up developing this hand signal that we would communicate, we would use when we did something really good. Whether we stole a base or scored a goal, whatever it was this kind of pseudo thumbs up with a pinky sticking out. And we did it really nonchalant, down by the hip, and we'd shake. And that meant, Dad, you're here, I know you're watching, and I love you. So back in ICU, you know, I'm still in this coma, and I had a really important surgery to get to. And the nurses were preparing me, my brother, mom, and dad were there. And they were talking to me before I went in to pre-op. Saying, Tanner, we're so proud of you, you're doing so well, we love you, we will see you when you get out. And this surgery, I had over 40 surgeries when I got out of the hospital. There was ones before this, and there was more to come. But this one was important. The outcome of this surgery really mattered. My parents knew this. They were in this emotional wreck. My brother was there. They were all kind of holding each other, looking on as the nurses prepared me to take me to pre-op. And looking down upon me, wishing me well, I gave them the signal. That was my first contact, my first response in over 2 weeks. It wasn't until then that my parents knew that I was going to be okay. They knew right then it was all going to work out. Waking up, as I call it, waking up, where I started to remember what was going on. I